name is Linda, and I'm 32 years old. I've always believed that family comes first, especially when it comes to my younger brother Marcus. We grew up together, shared everything, and I thought we'd always have each other's backs no matter what. I work in aviation services, something I've been passionate about since high school, and I've built what I thought was a pretty good life for myself. But sometimes the people closest to you can surprise you in the most devastating ways. What I'm about to share with you changed everything I believed about family loyalty and showed me who people really are when they think you're beneath them. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're all watching from, so drop a comment below. Please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, because what happened next will absolutely shock you about how one wedding invitation revealed my family's true colors. Growing up in suburban Chicago, our family looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Robert and Helen, worked hard to give us everything we needed. Dad was a middle manager at an insurance company, and Mom taught elementary school. We lived in a nice 3-bedroom house with a white picket fence, the whole American dream package. But even as kids, there was always this unspoken understanding about our roles in the family. Marcus was 3 years younger than me, but he was always the star. From the moment he could walk, everything revolved around him. He was the athlete, the honor student, the charming one who could make anyone laugh. Teachers loved him, neighbors praised him, and our parents beamed with pride whenever anyone mentioned his name. Marcus played football in high school, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and had colleges fighting over him with scholarship offers. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. I wasn't bad at school, but I wasn't exceptional either. I played clarinet in the school band, got decent grades, and spent most of my free time reading or helping Mom with household chores. While Marcus had football practice and academic competitions, I found myself drawn to something completely different. During my junior year of high school, I got a part-time job at Chicago Midway Airport, working in the gift shop. That job changed my life. I became fascinated watching the planes take off and land, seeing all the different people coming and going, and learning about the complex operations that made air travel possible. After a few months, I transferred to working with the ground crew during weekends and summers. I started as someone who helped direct planes to gates, then moved to baggage handling. The work was physical and demanding, but I loved being part of the aviation world. My parents never quite understood my interest. When people asked what their children were doing, they'd light up talking about Marcus's football achievements and academic success. Then they'd mention me almost as an afterthought. And Linda works at the airport. The tone always suggested it was temporary, something I'd grow out of once I figured out what I really wanted to do with my life. The expectation was always that I'd support Marcus's dreams. When he needed help with college applications, I spent countless hours proofreading his essays. When he needed new cleats or equipment, my part-time job money often went toward helping the family budget stretch to cover his expenses. I didn't mind because I loved my brother and wanted him to succeed. I genuinely believed we were a team. After high school, Marcus went to Northwestern University on a partial academic scholarship. The family celebrated like he'd won the lottery. We had a huge graduation party, and relatives came from 3 states away to congratulate him. For my high school graduation, we had cake at home with just our immediate family. The difference wasn't lost on me, but I tried not to let it bother me. I enrolled in community college and continued working at the airport, now doing more specialized work with aircraft maintenance and cleaning services. While Marcus got full financial support from our parents for his education, I worked 3 different jobs to pay for my classes. I'd work at the airport during the day, waitress at a diner in the evenings, and clean office buildings on weekends. I was exhausted constantly, but I was determined to make something of myself. The family dynamic never changed. Marcus was always introduced as our successful son who's studying business at Northwestern, while I was Linda, who works at the airport. The pride in their voices when they talked about him versus the apologetic tone when they mentioned me became more obvious as we got older. I started to realize that they saw my aviation work as something I'd fallen into by accident, not a genuine career path I'd chosen. But I kept pushing forward, driven by something I couldn't quite name yet. I loved the precision of aviation, the teamwork required to keep everything running smoothly, and the incredible engineering that made flight possible. While my family saw my job as manual labor, I was learning valuable skills and making connections in an industry I was genuinely passionate about. I just didn't know yet how far that passion would take me. After community college, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of looking for a traditional office job like my parents expected, I decided to start my own aircraft cleaning business. I was 25 years old, had saved $15,000 from my various jobs, and saw an opportunity that others were missing. The aviation industry has strict standards for aircraft maintenance and appearance, especially for corporate and private jets. Most cleaning services treated it like any other janitorial work, but I understood that these aircraft represented millions of dollars in investment and required specialized care. I researched the proper techniques for cleaning different aircraft materials, learned about aviation-grade cleaning products, and studied FAA regulations about aircraft maintenance. I called my new company Summit Aviation Services and started with just me, a van full of supplies and determination that bordered on obsession. Those first months were brutal. I'd work from sunrise to sunset, often 7 days a week. Some nights I was so exhausted I'd sleep in my van at the airport rather than drive home. My hands were constantly raw from cleaning chemicals, and my back ached from crawling around aircraft interiors. But I refused to give up. My first major break came 6 months in when I was hired to clean a tech executive's Gulfstream G650. The previous cleaning service had damaged some of the leather interior, and the owner was furious. I spent 12 hours meticulously restoring that cabin, treating every surface like it was priceless artwork. When the owner saw the results, he was amazed. Not only did he pay me double my quoted rate, but he recommended me to 3 other business associates who owned private aircraft. Word spread quickly in the private aviation community. Wealthy aircraft owners talk to each other, and they all want the same thing: someone they can trust with their multi-million-dollar investments. Within a year, I had a steady roster of high-end clients who were willing to pay premium rates for superior service. But I wasn't content just cleaning aircraft. I started noticing gaps in services that these wealthy clients needed. Many of them owned jets but didn't want the hassle of managing maintenance schedules, coordinating with pilots, or handling the endless paperwork required by the FAA. I began offering comprehensive aircraft management services, essentially becoming their personal aviation concierge. The business grew faster than I'd ever imagined. I hired my first employee, then 3 more. I invested in better equipment and expanded our service offerings. By year 3, I was managing 12 different aircraft and had contracts with 2 major corporations for their entire flight departments. The money was incredible, far more than I'd ever dreamed of making. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. One of my clients, a real estate mogul, was upgrading his fleet and offered to sell me his Citation CJ3 at a significant discount. It needed some avionics updates and interior work, but the price was too good to pass up. I took out a business loan, bought my first aircraft, and spent 3 months completely refurbishing it. Owning that plane opened doors I didn't even know existed. I could lease it to other businesses when I wasn't using it for my own company operations. The revenue from leasing more than covered the loan payments, and I was building equity in a valuable asset. Within 2 years, I'd bought 2 more aircraft and was operating a small but profitable charter service alongside my management business. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family still thought I was essentially a glorified janitor for rich people's airplanes, I was quietly building a multi-million-dollar aviation empire. I owned 3 jets, managed dozens more, and had annual revenues approaching $5 million. But I kept this success largely to myself. Part of me hoped that my family would eventually recognize my accomplishments on their own. I wanted them to see me as successful and valuable, not just because of what I owned, but because they finally understood who I really was. I dreamed of the day when they'd introduce me with the same pride they reserved for Marcus, when they'd realize that their quiet daughter had built something remarkable. I should have known better. Some people will only see what they want to see, and my family had decided long ago who I was supposed to be in their story. Everything started changing the day Marcus called me with his big news. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and I was in my office reviewing maintenance schedules when my phone rang. His voice was practically vibrating with excitement as he told me he'd proposed to Rebecca, his girlfriend of 2 years, and she'd said yes. I was genuinely thrilled for him. Marcus had been talking about Rebecca constantly since they'd started dating. She was a successful corporate lawyer from a wealthy Chicago family, beautiful and ambitious. Exactly the kind of woman our parents had always imagined their golden boy would marry. I immediately started gushing about wedding plans and asking how I could help. "Linda, you're the best," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Rebecca and I are thinking about a spring wedding next year. Something elegant, you know? Her family knows all the best venues and vendors." Without hesitation, I offered to contribute financially. "Marcus, I want to help pay for whatever you need. The reception, flowers, music, anything. This is such an exciting time, and I want to make sure you have the perfect day." There was a pause on the other end of the line that should have been my first warning sign. When Marcus spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly. "That's really generous, Linda, but Rebecca's family is handling most of the arrangements. They're very particular about how things are done. I laughed, thinking he was just nervous about impressing his future in-laws. Of course they want everything perfect for their daughter. I just want you to know the offer stands if you need anything at all. Over the next few weeks, Marcus started dropping subtle hints that made me increasingly uncomfortable. He mentioned that Rebecca's family moved in certain social circles, and that appearances were important for her father's law firm. When I suggested we all get together for dinner so I could get to know Rebecca better, he said they were incredibly busy, but maybe sometime soon. The engagement party was scheduled for a Saturday evening at Rebecca's family's country club. I was excited but nervous, wanting to make a good impression on the people who would soon be my extended family. I spent $200 on a new dress, got my hair done professionally, and arrived exactly on time. The country club was impressive, all polished wood and crystal chandeliers, with views of an immaculate golf course. Rebecca looked stunning in a designer cocktail dress, and Marcus was beaming as they mingled with guests. But from the moment I arrived, something felt off. When Marcus introduced me to Rebecca's parents, his usual confidence seemed forced. "This is my sister Linda," he said, then paused awkwardly before adding, "She works in transportation services." Transportation services. Not aviation, not aircraft management, not business owner. Transportation services. Like I drove a taxi or worked for the city bus system. Rebecca's mother, an elegant woman with perfectly styled silver hair, smiled politely, but I caught the quick glance she exchanged with her husband. Throughout the evening, I noticed similar moments. When people asked what I did for work, there were uncomfortable pauses before someone would change the subject. I overheard one conversation between Rebecca's mother and mine that made my blood run cold. "Helen, I hope you don't mind me asking," Rebecca's mother said in a voice that was carefully modulated to sound caring rather than judgmental. "But is there any chance Linda might consider finding something more traditional? Rebecca's father's clients are very conservative, and we'd hate for there to be any awkwardness." My mother's response was even more devastating. "Oh, Margaret, I completely understand your concern. Linda's always been satisfied with simple work, and honestly, we've tried to encourage her to find something more respectable. Maybe this will be the push she needs to reconsider her choices." I spent the rest of the party feeling like an outsider at my own brother's celebration. People were polite but distant, and I caught several whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. By the time I left that night, I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of bigger problems. Over the next several weeks, Marcus became increasingly difficult to reach. When I did talk to him, our conversations felt strained and formal. He stopped asking about my work entirely and seemed uncomfortable whenever I brought up wedding plans. Rebecca was always too busy to meet for lunch or coffee, despite my repeated invitations. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that the stress of wedding planning was just making everyone tense. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my brother. The easy camaraderie we'd always shared was being replaced by an awkward distance that grew wider with each passing day. The worst part was that I couldn't understand why. I'd always been supportive of Marcus, always put his needs before my own, always been proud of his accomplishments. Now it felt like he was embarrassed by me, ashamed of the sister who'd spent years cheering him on from the sidelines. I should have prepared myself for what was coming, but some betrayals are so profound that no amount of warning signs can really soften the blow. The phone call that shattered my world came on a Thursday afternoon in December, exactly 3 months before Marcus and Rebecca's wedding. I was reviewing quarterly financial reports for Summit Aviation Services when my phone rang. Seeing Marcus's name on the caller ID made me smile for what would be the last time in a very long while. "Linda, I need to talk to you about something important," Marcus said without any of his usual warm greeting. His voice sounded strained and formal, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed multiple times. "Of course," I said, setting aside my paperwork and giving him my full attention. "What's going on?" "It's about the wedding," he began, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. "Rebecca and I have been working on the final guest list, and we've run into some complications with the venue capacity. We've had to make some really difficult decisions about who can attend." A cold feeling started spreading through my chest, but I tried to stay positive. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. Maybe I can help with something. I know planning a wedding can be overwhelming." "That's just it, Linda," Marcus continued, his voice getting more tense with each word. "Rebecca's family has some concerns about mixing different social circles at the wedding. They've been very generous in helping us pay for everything, and we need to respect their wishes about the guest list." I still didn't understand what he was trying to tell me. Mixing social circles? Marcus, we're family. What does that have to do with anything? There was a long pause before he finally said the words that would change everything between us forever. Linda, I need you to understand that your job is, well, it's essentially being a garbage collector for rich people's planes. Rebecca's family thinks it would be embarrassing to have airline service workers at their daughter's wedding. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped and had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. What did you just say to me? Look, I'm not trying to be mean, Marcus said quickly, his voice getting defensive. But you have to admit that what you do isn't exactly prestigious. Rebecca's dad is a senior partner at one of Chicago's most respected law firms. His clients and colleagues will be at this wedding. Having someone who works as essentially the help would be awkward for everyone. I was so shocked I could barely form words. Marcus, I'm your sister. I've supported you my entire life. I helped pay for your college expenses. I've been nothing but excited about your wedding, and you're telling me I can't come because you're embarrassed by my job? It's not about being embarrassed, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. It's about understanding social dynamics. Rebecca's family considers airline service workers to be staff, not guests. You have to see their point of view. Their point of view? I repeated, my voice rising with anger and disbelief. Marcus, these people don't even know me. They've made assumptions about who I am based on what they think I do for work. And you're going along with it? Maybe this is a sign that you should think about finding a better career, Marcus said, and I could hear the frustration creeping into his voice. You're smart, Linda. You could do something more respectable if you really tried. This could be the motivation you need to make a change. I was quiet for a long moment, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. My own brother, the person I'd loved and supported unconditionally, was cutting me out of the most important day of his life, because he thought I was an embarrassment. So I'm not invited to your wedding, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Well, Marcus said, clearly uncomfortable. Rebecca thought maybe you could come to the reception for a little while. You know, after the ceremony and photos are done. Just to say congratulations, and have a piece of cake. But probably not for the whole thing. The casual cruelty of that suggestion broke something inside me. He was offering to let me attend my own brother's wedding reception like I was a distant acquaintance who deserved a pity invitation. I understand perfectly now, I said, my voice becoming cold and steady. Thank you for making your priorities so clear. Linda, don't be dramatic, Marcus said. You're always so sensitive about everything. I'm trying to include you as much as possible given the circumstances. But I'd heard enough. After we hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall for nearly an hour, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Then I did something I'd never done before in my relationship with my family. I decided to call our parents and ask for their support. The conversation with my mother was even more devastating than the one with Marcus. When I explained what had happened, there was a long silence before she sighed heavily. Linda, sweetheart, you have to understand Marcus's position, she said in the same tone she'd used when I was 5 years old and complaining about not getting my way. Rebecca's family is very important for his career. This wedding could open doors for him that we never could have provided. So you think it's okay that he's excluding me because of my job? I asked, barely able to believe what I was hearing. Honestly, dear, your brother is right about one thing, my mother continued. You've never really applied yourself to finding a more suitable career. Maybe this is the wake-up call you need to do something more appropriate for a woman your age. When my father got on the phone, his response was even more direct. Linda, your brother is making smart decisions about his future. This is his big day, and we need to support him. Sometimes that means making sacrifices for the greater good of the family. After I hung up, I sat alone in my office as the full weight of the situation settled over me. My entire family had decided that I was an embarrassment, someone whose presence would somehow diminish Marcus's special day. They'd chosen social status over family loyalty, appearances over love. For the first time in my life, I understood that my family didn't just underestimate me. They actively looked down on me. And that realization changed everything. The days following those devastating phone calls were some of the darkest of my life. I barely slept, couldn't concentrate on work, and found myself crying at random moments throughout the day. But somewhere in the depths of that pain, something else began to emerge. a cold, clear anger that crystallized into absolute determination. I was done hiding who I really was. I was done letting my family's ignorance and prejudice define my worth. If they wanted to exclude me because they thought I was just a garbage collector for rich people's planes, then it was time they learned exactly who they were cutting out of their lives. I called Marcus 3 days later with a proposition that surprised even me. "I want to meet with you and Rebecca," I said when he answered the phone. "There are some things about my work that I think you should understand before you make your final decision about the wedding." Marcus sounded wary, but agreed. "Fine, but Linda, please don't make this harder than it already is. Rebecca and I have made our decision based on what's best for everyone involved. Meet me at Chicago Executive Airport tomorrow at 2 o'clock, I said. "I want to show you exactly where this garbage collector works." Marcus tried to protest that he didn't have time for airport tours, but I insisted. "If you're going to exclude me based on my job, the least you can do is see what that job actually involves. Bring Rebecca, she should see this too." The next afternoon, I waited in the parking lot of the private aviation terminal, watching Marcus's BMW pull up with a mixture of anticipation and grim satisfaction. He got out looking annoyed and checking his watch, while Rebecca emerged from the passenger seat looking like she'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. "Linda, I hope this won't take long," Marcus said as they approached. "We have dinner reservations at 7, and Rebecca needs to get ready." "This won't take long at all," I replied calmly. "Follow me." I led them through the main terminal, past the commercial departure gates toward the private aviation section. Marcus looked confused as we walked past increasingly expensive aircraft and well-dressed passengers. "Where exactly are we going?" Rebecca asked, her designer heels clicking on the polished floor. "To my office," I said simply. We reached the Summit Aviation Services hangar, where my assistant Jennifer was waiting at the front desk. "Good afternoon, Ms. Linda," she said professionally. "The documentation you requested is ready for your review." I saw Marcus and Rebecca exchange glances at the respectful way Jennifer addressed me, but they still didn't understand what was happening. I led them through the office area, past conference rooms where my employees were meeting with clients, toward the hangar floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said as we stepped onto the hangar floor, "welcome to Summit Aviation Services." The hangar was impressive, even by private aviation standards. 12 aircraft of various sizes were arranged in perfect formation, from small Citation jets to a massive Gulfstream G650ER that I'd acquired just 6 months earlier. Each plane was spotless, maintained to perfection, and worth millions of dollars. Marcus stopped walking and stared. "Linda, what is this place?" "This is my company," I said, pulling a business card from my wallet and handing it to him. "Summit Aviation Services. I'm the founder, owner, and CEO." Rebecca took the card from Marcus's stunned fingers and read it aloud. "Linda Patricia Summit, Chief Executive Officer." She looked up at me with wide eyes. "You own all of this?" "Every aircraft you see," I confirmed, plus 8 more that are currently out on charter flights. We provide comprehensive aviation management services for high-net-worth individuals and corporations across the Midwest. I walked them over to my newest acquisition, the Gulfstream G650ER. This particular aircraft is worth $42 million. The client who owns it pays us $600,000 annually to manage every aspect of its operation, from pilot scheduling to maintenance coordination to flight planning. Marcus was staring at the plane like he'd never seen an aircraft before. $42 million? He repeated weakly. "The entire fleet under our management is valued at approximately $300 million, I continued. Summit Aviation Services generates annual revenues of $8.2 million. Last year, my personal income was just over $2 million after taxes." The silence that followed was profound. Rebecca's mouth was literally hanging open, while Marcus looked like he might need to sit down. "But you clean planes," Marcus finally managed to say. "I started by cleaning planes," I corrected. "Now I own 12 of them and manage dozens more. I employ 43 people, carry multi-million-dollar insurance policies, and maintain contracts with some of the wealthiest individuals and largest corporations in America." I pulled out my phone and showed them photos from a recent industry conference where I had been featured as one of the top young entrepreneurs in private aviation. That's me giving the keynote address at the National Business Aviation Association's annual meeting. The theme was Innovative Leadership in Aviation Services. Rebecca was studying the business card like it might disappear if she looked away. Linda, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell us about any of this? You never asked, I said simply. None of you ever asked what I actually did for work. You made assumptions based on how I started and never bothered to learn how far I'd come. Marcus was walking around the Gulf Stream, running his hand along its pristine fuselage. This is really yours? That one belongs to a client, I said. But these 3 citations are mine personally. I use them for business travel and charter them out when I'm not using them. Each one generates about $300,000 annually in lease revenue. The transformation in their attitudes was immediate and nauseating. Marcus suddenly became animated, asking detailed questions about the business and praising my success. Rebecca started talking about how impressed her family would be to meet such a successful entrepreneur. Linda, this is incredible, Marcus exclaimed. Why didn't you tell me you were running a multi-million-dollar company? Rebecca's dad would love to meet you. He's always interested in successful business owners. But their sudden enthusiasm only made me angrier. For 32 years, I'd been the same person with the same worth, the same intelligence, the same capacity for love and loyalty. The only thing that had changed was their perception of my bank account. So now I'm worthy of attending your wedding? I asked coldly. Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. Linda, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. If I'd known about all this. If you'd known I was wealthy, then I'd be good enough for your precious wedding, I finished for him. But when you thought I was just someone who cleaned planes for a living, I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. That's not fair, Rebecca protested. We just didn't want any awkwardness at the wedding. If we'd known you were successful, then you would have judged me differently, I said. You would have seen me as valuable instead of shameful. Do you understand how revealing that is about who you really are as people? I walked toward the hangar exit, leaving them standing among millions of dollars worth of aircraft. You called me a garbage collector, Marcus. You said I was essentially the help. You excluded me from your wedding because you were embarrassed by what you thought I did for a living. Marcus hurried after me. Linda, please, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Let's fix this. You're absolutely invited to the wedding. Rebecca's family will be thrilled to meet you. I stopped and turned to face him. No, Marcus. You showed me exactly who you are when you thought I couldn't benefit you. You chose strangers over your own sister because you decided I wasn't good enough for your new social circle. But now we know the truth, Rebecca said desperately. We can make this right. The truth is that you never cared enough to know who I really was, I replied. The truth is that you were willing to humiliate and exclude me based on assumptions and prejudice. The truth is that you only want me in your life now because you think I can enhance your social status. I looked at Marcus one last time, this brother I'd loved and supported for so many years. You made your choice, Marcus. You chose Rebecca's family's approval over your own sister's feelings. You chose social climbing over family loyalty. Those choices tell me everything I need to know about who you've become. With that, I walked away from them and out of their lives forever. The weeks following my confrontation with Marcus and Rebecca were transformative in ways I hadn't expected. Instead of feeling devastated by the family rejection, I felt liberated. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I wasn't valuable enough to matter. I threw myself into my work with renewed energy and focus. Without the emotional drain of trying to maintain relationships with people who fundamentally didn't respect me, I found I had more creativity and drive than ever before. Summit Aviation Services expanded into 2 new markets, and I was negotiating the purchase of 3 additional aircraft. But the most significant change in my life came in the form of James Mitchell, a talented pilot who had been working for one of my competitors. We'd crossed paths several times at industry events, and I'd always been impressed by his professionalism and expertise. When his previous employer went out of business, James approached me about joining Summit Aviation Services. Our first meeting was purely professional, but I found myself drawn to his genuine passion for aviation and his respectful, straightforward manner. Unlike my family, James never made assumptions about my capabilities based on my gender or appearance. He evaluated my business decisions on their merits and treated me as an equal partner in every conversation. James had grown up in a working-class family in Detroit, where his father was a mechanic and his mother worked as a nurse. He'd earned his pilot's license through military service and worked his way up through various aviation companies based on skill and dedication rather than family connections. He understood the value of hard work and never looked down on anyone based on their job title or social status. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship, then something deeper. James was the first person I'd ever been with who genuinely admired my accomplishments, without trying to take credit for them or minimize them. He celebrated my successes as enthusiastically as his own, and supported my ambitions without feeling threatened by them. 6 months after Marcus's wedding, which I learned later had been exactly as pretentious and shallow as I'd expected, James proposed to me during a sunset flight in one of my Citation jets. We were flying back from a business meeting in Denver when he suggested we take a slight detour over the Rocky Mountains. "Linda," he said over the intercom as we soared above the snow-capped peaks, "I've been thinking about something important, and I want to ask you while we're up here where we both feel most at home." He explained that he'd fallen in love not just with me, but with the life we'd built together, the respect we shared, and the dreams we were working toward as partners. When he pulled out the ring, I started crying before he even finished asking the question. Planning our wedding was everything the experience with Marcus's wedding had taught me to value. James and I focused on celebrating our love and commitment, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about our happiness, rather than what we could do for them. We invited colleagues who had become close friends, mentors who had supported our careers, and the employees who had helped build Summit Aviation Services into the success it had become. I hired the best wedding planner in Chicago and spared no expense in creating the elegant, sophisticated celebration I had always dreamed of. The venue was a historic mansion overlooking Lake Michigan, with gardens full of spring flowers and a view that took everyone's breath away. My dress was a custom creation by a designer who specialized in couture gowns, and every detail from the flowers to the music was perfect. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was spending more on my wedding than Marcus made in 2 years. But this wasn't about money or status. It was about finally celebrating myself and the love I'd found with someone who saw my true worth. The wedding was featured in Chicago Luxury Weddings magazine and several aviation industry publications that wanted to highlight the successful female entrepreneur and her pilot husband. Local news stations picked up the story as an inspiring example of American business success, focusing on how I'd built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. The coverage included photos of my aircraft fleet, details about Summit Aviation Services' growth and success, and interviews with industry leaders who praised my innovative approach to aviation management. For 3 weeks, my story was everywhere, a testament to what could be achieved through hard work, determination, and refusing to let others define your worth. It was during this media coverage that my family finally learned the full extent of what they'd walked away from. Marcus started calling the day after our wedding photos appeared in the Chicago Tribune's business section, but I'd already changed my phone number. My parents sent letters to my office that I returned unopened. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus's marriage was already showing signs of strain. Rebecca's family, it turned out, were just as demanding and condescending toward him as they'd been toward me. The social status he'd thought he was gaining through marriage came with constant pressure to maintain appearances and meet expectations that grew more unreasonable with time. Meanwhile, James and I settled into married life with the kind of peace and contentment I'd never experienced before. We traveled together for business and pleasure, expanded Summit Aviation Services into international markets, and began planning for the family we hoped to have someday. I realized that losing my original family had been the greatest gift they could have given me. Their rejection had forced me to build a new life based on mutual respect, genuine love, and shared values. I'd found my real family in James, and the community we'd created together. 3 years have passed since that devastating phone call from Marcus, and I can honestly say that cutting ties with my toxic family was the best decision I've ever made. The pain of their rejection has faded, replaced by a deep sense of peace and self-respect that I'd never experienced while trying to earn their approval. Summit Aviation Services now operates internationally, with offices in 3 countries and a fleet of over 30 aircraft. We've become the premier aviation management company in the Midwest, and I've been recognized by numerous industry organizations for innovation and leadership. The scared, insecure woman who once desperately sought her family's validation has been replaced by a confident CEO who knows her own worth. James and I recently welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Sarah Grace. Holding her for the first time, I made a promise that she would never have to earn love through achievements or compromise her authentic self to gain acceptance. She'll grow up knowing that her worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, even when those people are family. The most profound lesson I've learned is that blood relationships don't automatically deserve your loyalty or respect. Family should be the people who celebrate your successes, support your dreams, and love you unconditionally. Sometimes those people share your DNA, and sometimes they're the chosen family you create through friendship, marriage, and mutual respect. I've started a scholarship program through Summit Aviation Services for young women interested in aviation careers. Too many talented people are discouraged from pursuing their dreams because others can't see past stereotypes and assumptions. I want to help create opportunities for women who might otherwise be overlooked or underestimated. My story isn't about revenge or proving people wrong, though there's certainly satisfaction in knowing that the family who considered me an embarrassment missed out on sharing in genuine success and happiness. It's about the freedom that comes from refusing to shrink yourself to make others comfortable, and the peace that follows when you stop seeking validation from people who've already shown you who they are. Sometimes I wonder if Marcus ever thinks about the sister he threw away for social status that turned out to be far more shallow and temporary than the family bond he destroyed. But mostly, I don't think about him at all anymore. The space in my heart that once ached for his approval is now filled with James's love, Sarah's innocent joy, and the deep satisfaction of building a life that reflects my true values. To anyone watching this who has experienced similar family rejection or felt ashamed of honest work, please remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's limited vision. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is walking away, because it forces you to discover just how strong and capable you really are. Success isn't just about money or status, though financial independence certainly provides options and security. True success is building a life surrounded by people who see your value, support your dreams, and love you for exactly who you are. It's waking up every day knowing that you don't have to pretend to be someone else to earn your place in the world. I found that success not in spite of my family's rejection, but because of it. Their inability to see my worth forced me to stop hiding my light and start shining as brightly as I was meant to shine all along. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family members who couldn't see your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and please don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity and finding your true path. And share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they're worth more than other people's limited expectations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose for ourselves. May you all find the love and respect you deserve, whether that's with the family you were born into or the one you create along the way.